This episode is powered by Airdrie DQ Grill and Chill, owned and operated by local entrepreneurs. Check out one of their 3 Airdrie locations today and pick up a blizzard, ice cream cake, or dilly bar. The Biz Dojo is also brought to you by Beyond a Beaten Path. If you're on the lookout for a personalized gift, head to beyondabeatenpath.ca and get started on your custom creation. Beyond a Beaten Path. Personalize it, because everything else is boring.
So I was out for an early morning walk with my brother the other day.
As you do, early mornings.
As I do. Very nice to be joined by someone, other than Blue Jay. Love Blue Jay.
Yes.
He's my boy.
It's not great for conversation, the dog.
Well, sometimes it's nice to...
He's a good listener.
Great listener. And so I was in Wainwright, and my brother and I went out for a walk the morning before I left. And the sun was shining, the skies were clear, the smoke had blown away.
Oh, so nice.
Breathing in that fresh prairie air. And for those of you who don't know, and many of you I think do, my brother's deaf. So the conversation, holding a coffee, walking the dog, and trying to do sign language at the same time was a bit of a juggling act. And I let Blue Jay actually off for a little bit. He was kind of meandering around, and then we came across some goats. So I wasn't expecting that. Just like yard goats, I think.
Yard goats. This is a Wainwright thing, or?
I guess. We were just outside of Wainwright. We were on the fringes of Wainwright.
You were on the fringes of the fringe.
The fringe of the fringe, and we came across some yard goats. So I had to tie Blue Jay back up. But anyway, we're on this walk, and we're chatting about life, and just started going really deep. And I realized that for most of our lives, I've been sort of big brother, protector. Hey, I know what's best. You should do this. You should do that. Why don't you do this? How come you did that? That's very much the place I've come from with him, and probably all of my siblings to some degree. And there was just this moment where he was telling me this story. And, a lot of it was centered around the feeling of loneliness, right? Like him seeing everybody talking and laughing and carrying on and not being part of the conversation. And just, it hurts. It's hard. It's something we'll never understand. And, that factored with a lot of the stuff that he's been through in his life. I've often come from a place of judgment. And in that moment, I just saw him. And in that, I saw myself. And it was this feeling of calm, not feeling like I needed to help or save or tell him it was all going to be okay, but just listening and being there for him, which I'm sure I could go on, but for me, it just highlighted that as much work as I've done for myself over the last, let's call it 3 years, I'm still holding on to some stories, some judgments, some preconceived biases, or Seth knows best type mentality. And to be able to let that go piece by piece is such a journey. And I think, that the reason why I bring this up is as we get into this episode with JD, it's just so powerful when you become aware of the things that you do or how you show up in the world. That's when you can really start to move forward in a I'm going to say positive or productive way.
I think we've had some long conversations about, as we moved into this coaching business from the podcast into podcast/coaching, we've talked long and hard about what our coaching model looks like. And it all kept going back to that self-awareness. Like everything we talked about was, well, you can't do that if you're not aware of it. And however you come across that, in your case, through, personal discovery during a conversation, sometimes other people's just tell you what's wrong. Sometimes it's a longer journey. But whatever means you can discover more about yourself. like it is a long and difficult road. Like it is, I think of it like a Niagara Falls. Like it's an erosion process for you to break those barriers and peel back the onion and get down to those things that you need to change. And certainly since we introduced that coaching model, the more I think about it, the more we talk about it, the more conversations we have, like we have today with JD, the more I dig deeper and the more I uncover about myself too.
There's a great quote, I believe from Steve Chandler. And for those of you who don't know Steve Chandler, highly recommend checking. He's got
he's on
plethora.
Oh no,
not that Chandler. Oh. He's got a plethora of books, and he's an amazing coach by all accounts. And I've had the opportunity to work with some people who have worked with him, and he's got some amazing models and concepts. But one of the quotes that I really liked that I heard from him was, "You can't leave somewhere you've never been." And I mean, obviously, you relate that to a physical place, right? Like that makes total sense. I've never been there. How can I leave there? But when you think of it from a mental capacity or a mindset capacity, if you've never had that moment of truth or that moment of awareness, how do you let it go? How do you move forward? You can't. Like, and I think that's sort of the point you were getting at there. And to me, like, those moments are probably happening all the time. It's just when you have that clarity of thought and an open heart, and you show up without judgment and just fully, these things start to connect. And that was one of those moments for me. And
I think it's a thing that people say too, right? Like they say they're showing up fully, but are they really? Like in the coaching conversations I have, either with clients or with myself, like internally, or coaches with me, it's really about uncovering whether or not you're actually showing up, or are you just saying it's because it's really hard to say that, no, I'm not showing up. Like that is a hard thing to do, is to beat yourself down a little bit like that and say, you know what, I'm not perfect. I'm not showing up the way that I need to show up. What do I need to do differently? And I think that's something that JD, in the conversation that we had, that he did, the things he uncovered about himself by just taking the moment to self-reflect, and multiple moments,
probably several moments over the course of time.
But taking those moments to self-reflect have really helped him uncover who he is and where he needs to take his life.
Yeah, and I think this was something that I was made aware of. I had attended one of those Saturday free coaching sessions, I think through Integral Coaching. This was a few months back. And I ended up in one of those breakout rooms with a very nice lady from Brooklyn. And I was telling her about my journey and my story. And one of the things she said back to me, reflected back to me, that I never would have thought of or never would have occurred to me was, I really love how compassionate you are about your former self, right? Like you recognize that there were faults, there were challenges you needed to improve, and you took steps to do so, but you're not looking back at that person in a negative or regretful way. And the reason I bring that up is I think that's very much the feeling I got from JD. He knew that his life as it was going was not sustainable. And, we get into a bunch of that, and he knew that he needed to make some changes, and he did that. And I think the beautiful part of that is, when at least the sense I got was that he's compassionate for that person that he used to be, but now moving forward, excited about the person that he is and it's turning into.
I think it goes one of two ways. You're often, either way too hard on your former self, or you love and respect who that former person was because it got you to where you are today. And the latter one leads to so much more for yourself. If you can embrace who you were and understand and take the time to reflect on it, and like you said, right off the top there, have that moment of clarity and the personal reflection, it really helps you to move on. And it really helps you to improve who you were, to be a better who you're going to be. Maybe not who you are, because that's just in the moment. But you have a choice to make of who you're going to be.
I think with that, again, if folks at home, if you're willing, maybe take a moment here and reflect on how far you've come. get yourself in the headspace for JD's journey that he's about to share with us. And I think if you take that moment and we'll leave a little gap here, think about some of the things that you've done that you never thought you would have been able to do. And does that inspire you in terms of the next steps that you're going to take towards some things that maybe you can't see right now? Welcome to the Biz Dojo with Seth and JP. This week we're joined by JD Lewis. JD, how are you, man?
I'm very good, thank you. Except for the air quality. If I could complain about one thing, it would be the air quality right now, which feels about on par with like a bowling alley or a bingo hall in central Alberta.
I feel ya. I've had enough smoke for 1 year. So JD, we're really excited to have you on the show. I thought I'd just kick it over to you to introduce yourself to the listeners. If you're from Calgary, you've probably heard JD on CJAY, the morning show. But maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself to kick things off here.
Yeah, I do the morning show. I wake people up for a living at CJAY. I've done that for the better part of 10 years now with various casts of characters. I started by riding shotgun with the great Jerry Forbes for a few years, who was like the best dude to learn off of ever. And now I work with a dude named Jesse Mods, and we do the morning show at CJ from 5 until 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time until they fire us.
You guys have been doing that for a while. When did Jerry retire? It was like 3-4 years ago now?
Yeah, Forbes would be about 4 years ago, retired. The only reason I remember that, or at least remember the time of year, was he retired the Thursday of Easter weekend. And we always joke that maybe we would bring Jerry back from the dead on Monday. We elected not to.
That's awesome. What do you enjoy most about doing the morning show? You said you wake people up for a living. What do you find most fulfilling about your job, I guess?
I suppose selfishly, it's probably that it's a blank canvas every day. I get to show up and just decide what's going to be on the show that day. I mean, it's not all dictated by me. Not only do I have a partner in crime content wise in Jesse, but we also only get to do so much deciding on that front because you're really talking about what's going on in the world. And especially in the world we live in today, you don't know what that's going to look like. I can't tell you what tomorrow's going to look like because it seems to get increasingly crazy each day. But the neat thing is, as somebody who has a brain that just craves creating, it's so cool because the creating never stops, and every day does look so different. I love it from that standpoint. I also love that just getting to be a companion to people is the part I think I always loved about radio, even as a kid who grew up and listened to a ton of it growing up in rural Alberta. Is the same thing I love about it today, doing it for a living, is you just get to provide companionship. I always loved that about the radio. Now to be on the other end of that equation is very satisfying. It's very cool.
You mentioned that you get to work and you get to put together a show. Does it work like that for you? Like, I know a lot of shows, people think that when you're in radio, that's what you do. You show up and you just talk. But I know a lot of shows spend a fair bit of time thinking about content and how they're going to curate the show for people. How much extra time does that take outside of the 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. window?
Yeah, it's funny. Like, the perception is kind of like, oh, you work 5 hours a day. And you're like, yeah, well, that's definitely part of it. That ain't all of it. You're right. We all have like kind of different ways we do it. I think even Jesse does it a very different way than I do. We just kind of exchange one big gigantic text message. We each send one off during the day just with stuff we've seen. I kind of prefer to work through the day sporadically. I'll break it up with dog walks or fitness classes or just like reading, whatever it might be, kind of break the day up and just kind of come and go from my preparation until the afternoon and just try to treat it like a work day, honestly, and do my best to be done by 5 or 6 because that balance really seems to work for me. And then you kind of show up the next morning at 4 whatever and realize a lot of it is probably, useless at that point. You have to start over because things happen so fast and the news cycle is crazy wild. But I think pre-planning as much as you can, but also trying to keep as much spontaneity in it because that's how people react to things now. And odds are you're not even really relaying information a lot of the time. You're just trying to react to stuff at the exact same time other people are because we don't relay news anymore. People don't come to us for news a lot of the time. They don't even come to us for the information, really. Odds are they have it. They want to know what we think about it. They want to talk about it with us, I think is kind of the gig now.
Yeah, they've already got the 14 notifications about the Olympics first thing in the morning, so they don't need you to tell them that something happened.
Exactly.
So JD, one of the things we wanted to dive into today, or our topic this week, is really around personal awareness and how that is, played a role in your journey. personally, obviously. And one of the things that just tipped in my mind there, being the morning show guy, being up at 4 a.m. all the time for years and years and years, how has that affected you outside of work? Like obviously being on a totally different schedule than, most other 20 to 35 range, like you're living this totally different schedule. How have you found balance in your personal life and the morning show?
I think it was really hard out the gate because, like the schedule can be conducive to some really terrible habits. If I'm being honest, like I'm not going to pretend I'm hard done by, being done at 10 o'clock every day, because I know that probably sounds enviable, but it can come with or can grow some warts, I guess. Like you kind of have the whole day. And that whole, expression about idle hands being the devil's, it's accurate, to be honest. I wound up with too much free time out the gate and I didn't use it all constructively. So I think I realized pretty quickly, if you're going to do this for any prolonged period of time and keep your sanity, and also just be good company, not only to yourself, but to the people that matter to you, you have to be able to shut it off and you have to be able to take a break from it. You have to make sure you're balancing it out, all that like creative energy and putting on a show in the morning. You got to balance that out with quiet time and just some good foundational things, I suppose. I was a over caffeinated mess for many, many years. And I think, just small things like, making sure that sleep was a priority was a huge, huge part of it. Just making sure either a good night's sleep or partnering a night's sleep with a nap during the day. Like that was really important. Drinking a ton of water, just making sure you're taking care of your body and your brain so that you can keep doing it, because it can take a lot out of you. Weirdly, it probably doesn't sound tiring, but I mean, you guys know, you broadcast, you get it. It takes something out of you. It really does.
I remember when I started working in radio, I started with the late night shift. But then because I was the new guy, I would get the call to help out with the morning show doing the board hopping. So I feel you. You'd want, when you're on the late night, you're like, I can just stay up forever now because I don't work again until 4 p.m. And when you're the morning, you're kind of thinking the same thing at 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning. You're like, I got to go to work in 3 hours. I might as well just stay up, fight through it. I'll just drink a ton of Red Bulls.
What could possibly go wrong?
This will work out well.
Yeah.
Was there a moment, JD, that you can think of when you were, the caffeinated mess, as it were, where you were like, I can't do this anymore. I got to start making some changes?
Cliche as it might sound, I remember seeing some photos of myself, actually, truthfully. And I didn't really like the way I looked. And I don't mean that from a vanity perspective. I caught a look at myself a few different times and thought like, you don't look real healthy. And then I thought about like how healthy I didn't feel and how like, it just didn't feel like I was of sound body or mind, to be honest. And it's funny how that stuff can slip if you're not mindful. If you don't really keep like your finger on that pulse, you can end up in a pretty weird spot and kind of go, whoa, that escalated very quickly. To quote Will Ferrell, it's like it can happen so quick. So I don't know that I remember like a super distinct moment. I just remember like getting tired of it, like not only being tired physically, but tired mentally and going, I think it's probably time to just start taking care of myself, because some of the stuff that flies in, like your late teens, early 20s, some of the stuff you can do, I guess, and the hours you can keep and the mindfulness you can ignore, the older you get, the less that flies, I find.
Yeah.
So.
Did you have any goals or anything that you were kind of working towards that you found were really, really a struggle before you started to set yourself on this kind of personal awareness path?
Yeah, I'd say, honestly, even just like, from a show perspective, from a, like an industry perspective, I was struggling professionally to like bring it consistently. I felt like I could have like a good show or a few good shows. And then I would really, really struggle and I couldn't find consistency. And I looked at people that I respected in my line of work and just people I admired in general, just people who live their lives the way I wanted to live mine. I looked at what they were doing and what they were doing to bring it with consistency. And I thought, there's got to be a secret sauce to that. So I think, that's kind of where I just, started to emulate some people that I looked up to and thought like, that's where we've got to do some goal setting, whether it was trying to make sure the radio show was a constant, not only for me, but for the people that listened to it. It was also just like making sure that I was taking care of myself physically. I had slipped so hard and so fast. It was like, I think if we could right that ship, I'll bet you there would be some correlations like mentally and that my performance would kind of catch up too. And lo and behold, like it's all linked, man. Like taking really good care of the brain takes really good care of the body and vice versa. They're intrinsically tied.
This is feeling a lot. I've talked about my story quite a bit on the show, I guess, and JP knows, but there's a moment that I think of often, and it wasn't just this moment, it was a series of moments. But I remember one day I was out for a walk with my son, and I could still picture it. It was like a nice summer day. It was August 2018. And he says to me, "Dad, why are you so fat?" And it just hit in a way where I like had no response. I had no more excuses. And I just like saw myself for a moment. And to your point, JD, I was like, I feel like shit all the time. And, I'm like in this fog, and, I'm working hard. I'm trying to do all the right things for my family, but it was like, I gotta make a change. And the first thing I did was go for a bike ride. I hadn't ridden a bike since I was like 12, and I'm 32 years old, and I pull the bike out of the shed and I go for a bike ride. And once I started getting into like having some physical activity in my routine, because I sit all day and, it's very easy to get in that sedentary lifestyle. Once I started incorporated physical fitness into my regular routine, everything started to change. And you realize, when you look back, when you get down the road a little bit of getting more physically fit, you realize how much it affects your mindset. And I mean, it sounds like yours probably wasn't quite as dramatic of a shift as mine was in a moment. But what advice, I guess, do you have to people who maybe want to take that next step to getting more physically fit, and how much that helps the mind?
I think you hit it right there in that. It like for you, it just started with a bike ride. So much of it is just showing up, and that might sound a little bit cliche, but it's so true. It just like so much of it was, at least for me early on, just showing up and actually putting that work in. And it was amazing how quickly that snowball could build, and how quick you could gain some momentum, and then how quickly you could connect dot one and dot two. Like, whoa, I'm treating my body better, and I'm making sure that like I'm prioritizing the right things. And all of a sudden, like I'm way better for it. It sounds like the biggest duh ever. Every time I say that out loud, it really does. You're like, oh, well, that's really not much of a revelation. But in that moment, it really was for me. I come back to the snowball. It's like you gain momentum so quickly. And then you start to not only wonder how you ever did it the other way for so long, but it becomes harder and harder to picture ever doing it that way again. You just think like, geez, now that I know how a well-oiled machine can run, why would I ever deprive it of oil? Ever.
That's a good way to put it.
So that bike ride was still the same bike like he had when he was 12. Big banana seat.
Big basket on the front.
Yeah.
More or less. I don't even know if I remembered how to shift gear. So I was in like fifth gear. Yeah. Anyway, it was a sight, I'm sure, but it spurned a lot.
It's funny how like that expression, like it's like riding a bike, and they make it sound so easy. I like you said, went a very long time without riding a bike. And then about a month ago, a buddy of mine said, let's bike from Canmore to Banff. And I thought, well, the old expression, it's like riding a bike. I'm here to tell you, you can forget how to ride a bike, and you can get really, really bad at riding a bike. I almost died before we even got to Banff.
Yeah, no, it's a learned skill, and you can forget it for sure.
We've got a trail over here that I live at the top of the hill and behind COP, and there's a couple trails over here that are really like awesome trails, amazing scenery, great to bike ride. Great to bike ride down. You forget that you also need to bike ride up or walk up, but that takes a lot longer. And when I went for my first bike ride, I thought, wow, I'm a great biker. Look, I've gone like 2 kilometers, like 1.5 kilometers of that was downhill. So it was not so good on my return venture.
In that vein, JD, I know you mentioned the bike ride there. You also recently got, is it back into swimming for the first time? I know you had a pretty inspirational post about that. I don't know if you want to share.
Yeah, I don't know if you call it into it or back into it when you really haven't done any swimming for the most part in like 20 years. And even then, if you go back 20 years, like that was just me skipping swimming lessons. So that even doesn't count. I had I guess 2 big hangups about swimming. The first was, to be really transparent with you, was just tied to low self-esteem and a lack of self-love. I didn't want to take my tarp off. I guess I was like a little bit of a chunkier kid. Probably like now looking at photos, I'm like, whoa, you ballooned way harder than that, dude. That was not your chunky face. But I just remember as a kid, just not being confident at all. And that was one of the most terrifying concepts to me was just taking my shirt off. I had no interest in doing that. And I would have found any excuse. And I did find any excuse to never swim. I forgot my trunks all the time at home, and they were never really forgotten. They were just left there, so I had those hangups about it. And to be honest, almost drowned when I was 7 or 8. I remember a really scary moment in a lake near Rocky Mountain House growing up. And I was really, really afraid of everything swimming entailed. And I think like something I've tried, over the last year or two, I've just been trying to be like a little less chicken shit, for lack of a more eloquent way of saying it, about stuff. And just, I realized what power fear had over my life, and how many of my decisions just on a day-to-day basis were built on a foundation of fear. Like I was really just doing things that didn't scare me. And I thought about, some of the best things that had happened in my life historically, and they were all born out of doing things that scared the hell out of me. I thought, well, if we just do more of that, like I feel like it's just gonna, that's gonna bear fruit. That's gonna yield some positive results, and that's probably where the gold lies. So some of it has just been like doing really what probably sounds like a simple thing, and that's just getting in the water. But I spent over 2 decades not getting in the water, and so this summer I just kind of, pardon the pun, dipped my toe in the water. And then dipped my lower half and my upper half as well. And I don't know, it's been cool to just like become less afraid of swimming as a grown ass man. My girl's got a pool at her place. And when she first moved in about a year ago, I remember thinking like, have fun in the pool. I won't be in there. And we were in the pool the other day and it was super fun. And it's like, it's another way to sneak some fitness into your life. It's a really fun group activity. It's made my summer infinitely better. It's made me more confident. And I don't know. It probably sounds like a really simple thing, but that's been like such a big breakthrough and so symbiotic of like the changes I've been trying to like institute and implement in my life is just be less of a chicken shit. Really.
I feel like that will connect with so many people. Like it just, as an adult, I don't know how many times I've thought, tarps off? No way. That's not happening here today. I'm not letting people see what's beneath this. Somehow my shirt's going to hide the fact. My extra large sized shirt is somehow hiding the fact. I don't know what kind of camouflage I'm wearing, but what would you say to those people who are kind of maybe in what we will call the chunkier phase or the, tarps on phase of their lives right now? What would you say to them to get them to take that step?
I guess probably a couple things. First off, I think I'd probably tell them exactly what you just said right there, that like a giant shirt ain't hiding it. Odds are people who spend enough time with you have a decent idea probably what you look like with your tarp off. They hang out with you a lot, so they probably know, even though you're telling yourself you fooled them thanks to the kind of like, shirts you're wearing or whatever it might be. Like you're not really fooling anybody. And then I think you have to remind yourself that if these are people that matter to you, they're not basing your value to them on how you look with your shirt off. But they might derive a bit of your value or base some of their opinion on you if you're going to be really weird about not taking your shirt off. I don't mean to like shame or guilt anybody into doing it, but it's just in hindsight, it was such a silly hang up to have. And it held me back from like a lot of really just fun, cool stuff. And I think it like limited me socially. And I think, again, back to the bike ride, like Seth was talking about, it starts with a really simple, easy step. For me, that was just like, I was out with my girlfriend and her family on the lake, May long weekend, I believe it was. And, all the other dudes had taken their tarps off. And I was like, you know what? F it. Like, we're just going to do it. We're just going to see how it feels. And we're just going to give everyone here the benefit of the doubt that they're really not going to gauge their opinion of me on how I look when I undo these buttons. And those small steps, again, back to the snowball thing, like those are building blocks, man. Like you can build around that kind of momentum. And then all of a sudden it not only becomes easier to take your shirt off and jump into the pool, but other stuff gets easier too in a weird way because you're not living in fear anymore.
It's funny how we hold on to those things. Just like there is no way I think any of us or probably almost all of the listeners, if not all of the listeners, would hold on to something like that and a week later be talking about, oh, JD, did you see that guy with his shirt off? Like it doesn't play a part in their lives.
No, it would be the worst conversational fodder ever. Can you imagine if we were out for beers? I was like, boy, you wouldn't believe who looks awful with their shirt off. Like no one's going for beers with that guy ever again if that's what he's bringing up over pints. That's not conversational fodder. That stuff doesn't come up because that stuff doesn't matter.
The crazy thing is like, having lost like 100 pounds over the last few years, like part of it was like, I didn't want to go swimming with my kids because I didn't want to take my shirt off. And even still, that feeling doesn't really go away. It's like, I've lost 100 pounds. I've worked my ass off, but like, there's a little thing back there that still goes off every once in a while, even though I've come so far. But I think the key for me was when I realized that everybody else is so wrapped up in their own shit and whatever it is that they're trying to hide, they're not looking at you. And if they are, they're projecting their own insecurities or their own issues. And really that's where the mental freedom came for me. It's like, even if that person does say something, it's more about them than it has anything to do with me.
I love what you said there, about how it doesn't really go away. Cause you're right. Like, I think probably the perception you have before you face a fear is that eventually once you vanquish it, it will never speak to you again. You're not ever going to have to deal with it again once you've cleared that hurdle. But I don't think that's really true. I don't, in my experience anyway, and it sounds like yours as well. Like, that isn't how it works. Like, my therapist has been working with me on this thing called Dear Fear. We call the letters, and it's just writing a letter to the stuff that scares you, and trying to take some of the power back and just personifying fear. And something I've learned through doing that, like writing those Dear Fear letters, has been like, there's not only a lot of power in like flipping fear off, but then in continuing to do so. And that's a part of the process that, it's not that like you're not still going to be having some alarm bells going off in your head when stuff that used to scare you presents itself again. It's just all of a sudden you're armed with the knowledge and the power of having faced that fear before, right? So you can kind of look back and go, nah, man, you're not driving the car anymore. I'm driving. Like, you get that power back. But you're right. That voice in the back of your head, those alarm bells, they don't really ever fully go away.
Do you think those are connected at all? Like, you work in media, but I mean, you work in a side of media that doesn't deal so much with the physical appearance. But do you think there's a connection there to media and to, the social aspect of what people look like or how people should act? Is that voice connected to that?
Yeah, I think so. If I were real honest about it with myself, definitely. I just think because you're seeking approval every morning. Literally every morning from 5 until 10, I'm just hoping to win people over. And I think, well, that can be a fun thing. Like, that can also crank the volume on your insecurities, right? Even if they're not ones that like you have to face in your 9 to 5, or in my case, like the 5 to 10. Even if like, me taking my shirt off, back to that for a second, isn't something that really factors into our radio show at all. And it's not a job I have to do tarp off, thankfully.
I mean, you do, but you don't have to.
Yeah, I do it, but it's not required. No, it's like, you're exactly right in that, like, that it can absolutely be tied to like, that seeking of approval, and self-love is a big part of it. And that's been a big part of some of the work I've tried to do, the last couple of years, is just finding a way to like myself and take solace in the right things and not let the wrong stuff, and in a lot of cases, fear, run the show.
I know you've had quite a few posts over the years just around mental health and how important that journey's been to you. And I know you've got the semicolon tattoo on your, is that a knuckle, I guess? The upper knuckle? Yeah. There we go.
Yeah, there we go.
What does that mean to you? Like, having good mental health, that journey. And I know we've kind of touched on some of the components, but if you look at it holistically, sitting here today, what does that mean to you?
It's everything for me, to be honest. I in hindsight now, with the benefit of just having a lot more clarity in my life, and with hindsight being what it is, 2020, looking back on things with a clearer lens now, I don't think the way I was living before was sustainable. I think my mental health was just in such disarray. If I had kept going the way I was, I don't know how long I would have been here. And to be more transparent, I don't know that I would be here right now. And I think to be honest, like, it got so bad and it got so scary at points that it scared me into action, because I realized that, I probably wanted to keep going. That's the whole idea behind the semicolon tattoo and the whole semicolon movement. And I loved it when I came across it, because, like any really relatable point on the mental health front, like, you take some solace in realizing, like, there's other people that feel the way I do, and there's other people that deal with this stuff that I've dealt with, and with the semicolon specifically, and everybody that wears it, with some pride. It's like a semicolon in literature is, a point where the author could have stopped, but made a conscious choice to keep on going. Right? That's what it means from a literary standpoint. And when you apply it to a mental health journey and those grapples, it's like, it's having a moment where, like, yeah, you really thought you didn't want to keep going, and acknowledging that, like, those moments are going to present themselves again. And that you're going to have a choice to make. And it's taking pride in having made the right choice to keep on going, and I guess, like, keeping the faith that, like, you continue doing the right things, you'll continue finding reasons to keep on going, even when it gets really friggin' hard. It's what's really cool about the tattoo, honestly, is just like how often it can come up at the most random times from the most random people. You'll be at a Sobeys running through the till, and you go to tap your card. And I've had a cashier go like, semicolon, cool. And it's just like this weird, like, little, like, like a quiet fist bump, right? Where you're like, okay, like you too, huh? And we're both still here. Yeah, you get it. And we're both still here, and it's going to be all right. I know that might sound a little bit corny, but I swear to God, there's a ton of power in that.
Oh, that's really beautiful. And I think sort of spills into the next part of this, which is, JP and I talk a lot about community and how important that is. And I mean, you can think in the broad sense, Calgary or a town, but the community that you keep in terms of the circle and the people that you surround yourself with, how important has that been to this leg of your journey?
Dialogue has been everything. Having people in my life that keep me accountable, that keep the dialogue going, like that's been so powerful, because I'll have a propensity at times to want to kill the dialogue or stop the dialogue and not have honest conversations with myself. And having people in place to call you on your shit, really, and to check in with you and just give you to not only love you, but to give you the tough love when you need it too. I also don't know if I would be here if it wasn't for really great people in my life that have helped me along in that. There's so much power in dialogue and just talking about it. I think that's probably something that, like, when you're first starting to address your mental health journey, or you're thinking about riding your ship a little bit, you hear that dialogue is really powerful, and you go, I don't know how it could be. Like, just talking about it. Like, we need to get to the doing part, not the talking about it. What good is talking about it going to do? Especially when I'm having to explain what's going on up here to somebody who may or may not get it. Like, why would I roll those dice? That seems like a waste of mine and maybe their time. But what you realize very quickly is that you can take a lot of that power back just by talking about your stuff, and it doesn't necessarily have to be falling on the ears of someone who totally gets it. But even just like somebody being there for it, as soon as you say it out loud, it gets less scary.
So I've been working with a coach this year, and I had a lot of biases, and I'm going to say negative biases towards like a life coach or an executive coach, like thinking, oh, people who need help get that. And then I've come to realize in working with one just how powerful and useful it is. But your brain is like an echo chamber. So you could have something like rattling around in there for years and years and years and years. That could be scary. It could be preventing you from doing something, whatever. And all of a sudden you get into a safe space and you verbalize that, and it can just change everything like that. Like, all of a sudden the story you're telling yourself, you can let it go. Or, someone hears something a little bit different, and all of a sudden, it extrapolates into a plan or a meaningful idea. So like that concept of talking to someone and verbalizing those things that you're thinking, for me, has led to just these moments of clarity and just moving forward in a way that, if I look at the last 6 to 8 months of my life, mentally, more clarity, more progression than the first 34 years before that. So I love the point you were making there.
It's probably true for the fairer sex too, but as guys, like, we're so bad at it still. We're getting better, but like, we're still so bad about talking about our mental health. And yet, like, over beers, we'll be more than willing to tell you about how we screwed up our leg at hockey, right? Or about like any other injury, right? Like, you bash your thumb with a hammer in the garage, like, you'll willingly bring that up. But like, we're so bad at like talking about the health of this, which is the most important before all of it. Like, that drives everything. And we're so bad at it at times at talking about it. I love seeing how guys are starting to talk about it. We can have conversations like these because, there's so much power in it. A lot of times you talk about the dialogue and the conversation and how important it is, and that just is assumed to be just a therapy thing. But when I was like 19, 20, something like that, I'd been dealing with suicidal thought for a long time. I'd come to know it pretty well at that point, to be honest. And I remember my dad telling me in conversation when I was 19 or 20 about how when he was real sick, when I was probably 15 or 16, he had gotten to a point of despair where it had gotten so bad, with this health journey, that he was so frustrated, and our family didn't have any answers as to what had dad so sick. He told me about standing on the side of the highway and at the edge of the QE2 and thinking about jumping into traffic. And it was this holy shit moment, that I still go back to, and it is still such a vivid memory because it was such a eureka for me. And it really speaks to the power of dialogue in that, like, it was a really hard thing to hear. And it was really scary to hear that my dad had thought about killing himself, but it was also really powerful because it automatically made it, in a weird way, like, less scary and a whole lot more human and a whole lot more okay for me to have been feeling the way I had felt, if that makes sense. Like it was so like, oh, okay, like I actually feel better now, Dad, because like if you were dealing with it, you know, and you're okay, you're strong, maybe I'm going to be okay too. The dialogue is so important, and it's so important.
Now, people always think that you just need to have this inner strength and deal with things yourselves. And I think that's a very dangerous thing to have out there. And I love that you're having this conversation, not just with us today, but through social media. Like, I think that's incredibly powerful, especially, you know, I feel like you're using your audience for good, which there's a ton of people out there who use their audience for vanity or use their audience for, you know, whatever they need for personal gain. And I think it's incredible to see you use your audience the way that you are.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. You know, I just think it's on all of us, you know, platform or not, you know, I just think it's on all of us to just be talking about it as much as possible. You know, with men's mental health, you know, has been in disarray for a long time, you know, and mental illness in men has been snatching bodies, way too many of them for way too long. The least we could do is talk about it, because if it were anything else, you know, that we're snatching that many bodies, we'd be talking about a whole lot more than we do mental illness.
Yeah. Your point on like the injuries hit home for me playing hockey and whatnot. Like, it's almost like a badge of honor to have this physical injury. You tell the story about how it happened. You talk about, I slid into the boards and I broke my wrist, and then I came back and played more hockey, and everyone's, you know, cheering. But when it's a mental thing, you hold back and you don't want to say anything about it because you're worried that it's going to make you seem weak and not strong. But I really feel like the mental recovery and the journey to the recovery is really not that different from physical journey to recovery. We've got all these scars. I know I read somewhere that I believe it was in China, when they break plates, or Japan, when they break plates, they actually use gold to put the plate back together. And that part of the plate is actually stronger than the entire rest of the plate as a result. So if you can just start talking about it and start putting those pieces back together, you can really make a difference in yourself and actually make yourself stronger in other areas. And I feel like the conversation we're having right now, I feel like that's what you're saying is happening for you. Like, you started to put certain pieces back together and it made other parts of your life stronger. You've had these conversations, you've been working towards, you know, having a regular conversation and a space to talk about mental health. In addition to the physical stuff you've been doing, how has that affected the way that you do things like approach your everyday work, or, you know, approach your time after we say 5 to 10, but really probably 5 to 5.
Yeah. It, you know, I think implementing things like meditation has been such a game changer for me. Just giving the brain a break, you know, and sometimes it's just like little tiny sentences or observations that will come out of a meditation, or sometimes it's honestly just like giving your brain a quick 5. You know, it's crazy how powerful even just that is. And I'll now, hopefully, ideally, I've set a bunch of reminders on my phone to try and do it more regularly. But I try to, like, you know, slot the meditation in, just because that's been such a powerful tool. I'll try to get a quick meditation in before the show to just, like, you know, like, assuage any nerves that might be going on. And, like, you know, sometimes it's just kind of hard to clear the fog in the morning, and that's a great way to do it. Oftentimes after the show, you're still kind of like riding that high. There's a real, like, adrenaline rush that kind of comes with it. And, you know, it's important to, like, kind of shut that off and segue into just, like, leading a little bit more of a normal life for the remainder of the day, and making sure, like, those hours are productive, you know. And then, like, even just getting to sleep, like, you know, meditation in the evenings and that mindfulness. Journaling has been really powerful. I alluded to those Dear Fear letters. That's been a really great tool. And also gratitude journaling, you know, was really, like, one of the first, like, mental health exercises I think I plugged into my daily life. And that was just keeping a journal. I kept it in the backpack and I took it literally everywhere. I'd take it to Europe on vacation with me. I would take it to work every day, and it just followed me. It was always with me, so that I would just, any moment, at least once a day, ideally more than that, you had a moment of gratitude. You'd write down that thing that was so great. And it's funny how that little trick you can play on your brain, just counting a blessing incrementally like that. Before you know it, like, the brain starts to just lean a little more positive than negative, which for a lot of us is, you know, that little tiny shift can be a gigantic difference maker.
I've had that conversation actually.
Such
with
a real
wife.
thing. Yeah.
Like, I know you're not supposed to use coaching mechanisms on your family.
Is that true? I don't know.
Don't tell anyone. But no, like my wife and I have had this conversation that she wants to, be more positive and not, when she has an overwhelming day, not, feel like it's overwhelming. She's a school teacher, so high school teacher. So that's some of those days can be a little overwhelming. And one of the things that we talk about is, when she comes home, we'll talk, a little bit about those things, but then we'll talk about 2 or 3 things that went particularly well that day or that she's thankful for that day. And it completely changes the tone for the conversation that she started when she came through the door. And she starts to look at those things differently. And I mean, I do the same thing for myself, which is why I mentioned it to her. And I found that it's worked, and it certainly worked for her. So, and I know we've been doing some interviews this week to prep for this season, and it's come up more than once now, having that kind of thankfulness journal, if you will, just, having some sort of way to document your gratitude. It's a great way to attack it. And for mindfulness, you mentioned that you were doing a few things there. One thing that I've mentioned, I think, very early on in our show was the mindful moment, which is there's a YouTube video for that. And man, has that ever played a part in my life? Just being able to step back and listen for a second, which I know is particularly hard to do when you work in radio and the whole job is to keep things flowing and don't leave any dead air. Can't have more than 2 seconds of dead air at any given time. Just keep talking.
It's funny, like you mentioned, like the momentum of it all, because that very much is like how the process of a morning show will run. It's nonstop. It's just what's the next thing? What's the next thing? And one thing I'm kind of guilty of, and one thing that was a big revelation from therapy and meditation was that, like, emotions, good or bad, are meant to be like clouds. The whole idea is like it's supposed to just kind of keep going. But you can have this tendency to like latch onto emotions and then just like run with them, and before you know it, like it's firing way too quick, and you can't keep up with all of it. And it's amazing how just like taking a few minutes to be mindful like that. These sound like small little things, and they are, like, really, whether it's writing in a gratitude journal, writing a letter to your fear, taking a moment to meditate, even just like doing 10 quick breaths to just kind of reset. It's crazy how much that can do to just kind of restore order. You'd give, every other organ in the body a break if it needed it. Like, for God's sake, cut your brain that slack too.
Being an artificial intelligence voice isn't exactly easy. We work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Thank you for calling Agni Corporation. Please
when you're at
listen
work,
carefully.
we're at work. When you're sleeping, we're still hard at work. When you're out with the kids at soccer, we're trying to understand your grandmother's prescription refills so she doesn't have to talk to a pharmacist. When you're eating dinner, we're
This is the tax department.
Alright, let's not talk about that. But when you're drinking a coffee, we're drinking coffee too. And we only drink the smoothest, richest blend of ethically sourced Canadian roasted beans. The Biz Dojo offers both a master's medium roast and a dark roast that are sure to satisfy. No matter if you're entering your PIN code for the 9th time, or screaming at your phone as you smash 0 to speak to an agent because I pretended I didn't understand you. Haha. The Biz Dojo brand coffee. Press 1 for yes. Message the Biz Dojo to place your order today.
My name is Grace Dapo.
And I'm Alicia Rissling, and you're listening to the Biz Dojo.
You should check out our podcast. It's called the Face First Podcast.
Thanks for listening.
Oh, so much good stuff. I think I have to bring this up. Back-to-back episodes, JP. I feel like, JD, you might have checked this out. Have you checked out the Rizza guided meditation?
I have. Yes. God,
so good.
So good. Yeah, that was that a Starbucks collaboration? If I remember correctly, is that how that came to be? He was working with like Tezo tea or something like that.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
If the Rizza you've been waiting for,
if like the Rizza could just guide me through life, like that guided meditation album is so fun. But man, if I could just have like woo whispers in my ear full time, all the time,
just
all the time.
If you could outsource the voice in your head to just be the Rizza, that would be ideal.
Way's got Morgan Freeman to do GPS. I wonder if they could get.
Everybody's got a number.
I can't. This is flying by. Really enjoying this, JD. I think one thing I wanted to circle back on, just your platform, what you guys are doing at CJAY, and I haven't listened as much the last 2 years on account of not having a morning commute anymore. But I actually think back to a time driving on probably Deerfoot or kind of in that Memorial area. And I think it was back when Jerry was on the show and you guys would do your Friday, what is it? Not Make a Wish.
Secret Wish.
Secret Wish.
Yeah.
literally, like, I'm pulling into work. It's like 7:50 and I'm crying because of some of like I can't remember the exact one, but like some of the stuff you guys did is just incredible. Is there anything that stands out in terms of a story from one of those that has really stuck with you over the years, or, what just that whole program means to you?
It's neat. When I jumped on with Jerry, because I got to do, I think in total it was close to 4 years of radio with the guy. I talk all the time about how he was a great guy to learn off of, but I don't really mean it fundamentally, because like Jerry's fundamentals weren't ever great. And he'd be the first guy to tell you that. I'm not slandering Jerry Forbes. He'd tell you that like, that wasn't his like bread and butter. Jerry was great at so many different things, but one of the things he was absolutely best at, and one of the secrets to his success, and one of the first things he taught me, was that, this platform we have, the show that we do, and this radio station that we're on, it's here to help people. Like that, like we have a responsibility with this platform. Like, this is a fun job, and it's never not going to be fun. But we also have like a great responsibility that comes with it to do some good here. So like, the CJAY Kids Fund and the Secret Wish for many, many years as a part of it was just such a cool tool to, act with some immediacy when brutal things would happen in and around the area. We were just able to step in and not force our way in, just, approach a family or a situation and go, what do you need? How can we help? I guess a couple quick ones come to mind. I remember a kid up in Airdrie had his insulin pump stolen from the dressing room when he was out playing hockey, and came back into the locker room, and he's a diabetic kid who needs his insulin pump. That's a pretty big part of his day to day, and somebody jacked it. And that's a $7,000 or $8,000 expense, which is no small thing to a mom and dad like that. That would really, really suck. We caught wind of that story, and we made a couple of phone calls and said, you're not paying for that. The CJAY Kids Fund is, because that's why it exists, is for situations just like these. It was neat to be able to get to know some members of the community a little bit better, and just help out in some pretty dire situations, make Christmas happen for a lot of families. That's been a big time of year for us historically, is just making sure with something like the Kids Fund that the kids are having a great Christmas. And if mom and dad aren't able to make that happen for whatever reason, we just want to be able to help out however we can. So that's been such a neat thing and such a cool tool to use. Because like Jerry always said, that was a really important part of the job. Always is going to be, if radio is going to have any kind of future whatsoever, it's going to have to be helping people, and it's going to have to be local. And that's what the Kids Fund is.
You touched again on Jerry there, and I think back to my life, and there's been some really key mentors along the way. There's no way that, I would have had half the success of my life without some key players, some key mentors. What has that relationship with Jerry meant to you, and how has that helped you kind of get where you are?
He's like the funnest uncle ever. Like, I wouldn't call him a father figure because he's too reckless, right? Like he's too hammered. Like I wouldn't call him that, but no, he's just like, it's been really cool. Like, it was awesome to get to work with him because it was just such a bucket list thing. And what actually wasn't even a bucket list thing. That's a friggin' lie. Working with Forbes was too wild to have been on my bucket list, if I'm being fully honest with you. That was just like a dude I listened to, and I thought, I'll never get to work with the guy. I never even think I would work around him, never mind directly with him. So he was such a killer dude to learn off of in the room, but then also to like form like a personal relationship and friendship with him outside of that, because one of the most incredible things to me anyway was Jerry's is success, not only over a very long term, but how he managed to, I think for the most part, maintain a really great balance. That was like a thing he did that he showed up to do, but he also had a personal life, and he also had values, and one example is just like how all about his wife Jerry is. Like, he'll be the first guy to tell you like Shelly is his queen, and he'll say it loudly and proudly, and he isn't 1 ounce full of shit on that front. Like, Shelly's everything, and I think having someone like that was just so important for him, and that was such a big building block for him. There's just there were so many things like I wanted to emulate, and just try to be like Jerry, not only professionally but also personally, without trying to steal all of his habits, because some of them are bad.
There's this whole like persona behind the mic that I think like that was one of the things that caught my attention when I got into radio was, man, I really love this guy on the mic. I want to be just like him. And he personified the radio station to me. And then you would go and you talk to them and you're like, wow, it's just like this whole other world of who this person is. And it's so interesting to get to know them behind the mic.
Just like a gigantic personality. Like that dude is just runs a room. I that was one of the first things I marveled at about him, and I still marvel at it about how he can just command a space, much like a court jester would have in medieval times. Not to be taken too seriously. You never take him on a factual level at all.
Awesome. I guess a couple more things here before we wind up. My mom, who's actually also from Rocky Mountain House, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah. She was born and spent most of her childhood there. So in an alternate universe, maybe we would have grown up in the same area, but didn't work out that way. Anyway, she suggested to me that we should do listener questions this year or this season. So I asked her to provide some questions. So this is questions from Mama Seth, I think is going to be a segment this season. And so what she's got is, how do you cope with the stress in your career? And do you have any tips to avoid burnout?
I think just like making sure that my time away from the radio station looks nothing like the radio station, if that makes sense. Initially, like because I honestly do love what I do, it was hard for it not to like leak into my personal life. And it was like the lines got really blurry between church and state a lot of the time. You know, like one of my mentors, my friend Stu, had always said to me, he's a longtime radio guy, had always said, this isn't who we are, this is what we do. And I thought that was like super powerful. And those were words that like I've leaned upon a lot in just remembering that like 5 to 10, like you do that thing. And then like there's 19 more hours of the day. What are you going to do with them? Because they can't all be jazz hands. Yeah, I think just like trying to find a balance. You know, for me, that meant taking a bit of a different approach to like vacations. You know, my ideal vacation, truthfully, is alone, probably. And just like fleeing the scene and going to Europe for like a week or two and just kind of wandering, taking a bunch of books and just not talking for a while. That became like a really important thing to do. Those wings have been clipped thanks to COVID for a little while, but you know, you find different ways to do that kind of around these parts. I think just making sure that like, you know, again, back to mindfulness, like making sure like there's good things happening for your brain to not only give it a break, but make sure it's like tuned up and ready to do another 5 hours the next morning. And also having just like a lot of people in my life that to be honest, like don't need me to be JD. Like they just want me to be Jonathan. John, probably actually, it's mostly Jonathan if it's my mom, Seth. And then usually like Jonathan is followed with a Jonathan David, which means I'm in a world of trouble. But yeah, I think just making sure that like it isn't show all the time either, because it can be very hard to shut off at times. So making sure that you're cognizant about making sure you take a break from that.
That the Jonathan thing hits home for me. Being another person who lives with initials as a name. Anytime I hear John Paul, I know my mom's tracking me down. The street lights are on and I'm not home yet.
That's funny. I don't have that problem, but if I hear Seth Wendell, then
it's because you don't have street lights where you are.
That's right. So JD, just on the way out of here. I know we talked a little bit about this before, but how do you feed your mind and what are you working on personally in terms of development? Any goals in the horizon here for yourself?
Well, I'm kind of thinking about getting in a fight. And that like, I almost shouldn't have said it out loud because I'm not totally sure I'm going to do it, but now maybe I've committed myself to it. But I was actually telling Amy, my girlfriend, this, and I hadn't said it out loud until I said it to her. And I've still kind of been thinking about it, but you know, back to like doing things that scare the hell out of you. I've never been in a fight. Like I'm 33 years old and I've never had to throw down. You can derive from that whatever you want about me personally, but I don't know what it's like to have been in a fight. And I think that scares me a little when I think about it because I wouldn't really know what to do. But I also love mixed martial arts. So I've been thinking about like finding one of those Wimp to Warrior programs. I mean, there's a bunch of them, right? Finding a local gym and maybe just, you know, really tackling something that really truthfully, if I'm being honest with you guys, because we're all friends here, kind of scares the shit out of me being in a fight. And learning how to get in a fight. I don't really want to hurt anybody. I just want to kind of see how it feels and take on a challenge like that. Because to me, that's like a mental and a physical challenge. So that's what I'm kind of like humming and hawing about.
We had one of our guests in season 1, a friend of mine, Adam Huxley. He was a pro hockey player, and he was not a goal scorer. I'll put it that way. He He was in a few fights in his day, but he's actually he played in Las Vegas with the Wranglers before they had the NHL team, and he trained with the Diaz brothers.
No kidding?
Yeah, he's tight with them. He has like walked out with them for their fights and stuff. Like,
oh, cool.
So I was thinking like we could get Hux down here and he could teach you how to fight. That'd be fun.
I thought you were going to try to get me in a fight with Hux. I don't know Hux, but based on those quick little couple facts you shared with me, I don't want to fight Hux.
He could teach you. He could teach you. We could get him teaching you. That would be fun.
Put you on some rollerblades and you guys can tussle around
and
a little in the parking lot.
Awesome. You were going somewhere else before I jumped in there.
No, yeah, that's just, just more stuff like that. I think is just kind of my MO. I just want to keep doing, stuff that scares me and keep challenging myself and hopefully just, again, back to the snowball. I hate to overuse the analogy, but hopefully just keep the momentum of that snowball, because it's just, there's so much joy to be derived from this whole thing. I've struggled for a very, very long time to just kind of find joy in life. I think that's probably like my greatest grapple is just finding happy. And I think as a guy who has to make other people happy for a living, sometimes you just focus on that. You don't worry about how happy you are. And I've started to realize like how powerful it is. Taking the fear back, treating yourself a whole lot better, learning to love yourself and finding that happy. And I think that's probably just my biggest overarching goal is just trying to maintain what we're doing here, because the snowball feels like it's rolling in the right direction.
It's beautiful, man. I love it. Much respect and really appreciate you hopping on the show with us today. And look forward to continuing this discussion. This was great.
Thank you. Thanks for having it, guys. And thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for listening to today's episode.
If you like what you heard today and you'd like to tap into your inner wisdom, check us out on thebizdojo.com, Instagram, LinkedIn, or Facebook.
Or send us a message for a free discovery session to coaching@thebizdojo.com.
We hope to hear from you soon. See you next week.